Once you get into the combine period and especially afterwards, the pre-draft workout process, it can be easy sometimes to forget about the film. It can be easy to fall in love with the guys that have explosive vertical and broad jumps, the guys that can sit there and run the 40-yard dash in such and such time. They dominate the three-cone and shuttle drills, and they look great in their underpants when their crotches aren't splitting out, right, Chris Jones? Anyways, those are the guys sometimes that are easy to fall in love with. Those are the guys that the NFL draft media machine and the hype machine start to focus on, and in a lot of cases focus on too much. And the emphasis goes away from the game film. And at the end of the day, it's the game film that tells you the true story. And sometimes the guys that I like the most are those solid players. They might not be spectacular, but they're solid players. You feel like as you watch them, you see a guy who will produce to a certain level, at least at the NFL level. They have very little bust potential to them. They may never be a superstar, but you feel relatively confident if you throw your weight of support and your voice behind them that you're going to look all right for doing so 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And make no mistake about it. When all of us are sitting there evaluating draft prospects, we want to be right. We don't want to be wrong. So sometimes we'll gravitate towards those guys that may be safer, that have low bust potential. And I know that a lot of people, when it comes to Alabama and their defensive line in 2015, focused on Ashawn Robinson because of his supposed superior athletic and physical package. The truth of the matter is his teammate on the defensive line, Jarran Reed, was just a far-out better football player, period. Period. Like, I don't even see how you can watch the film and say there is a comparison between the two of them. A lot of what you'll see, you'll talk about Ashawn Robinson's primary responsibility in that defense was to eat up space. Actually, that was Jarran Reed's responsibility primarily, and he ate up more space and actually created more damage in the backfield and got more consistent penetration and made more plays, in my opinion, than Ashawn Robinson did, and more positively affected more plays by far than Ashawn Robinson did. But because there are certain stigmas about Jarran Reed in terms of athleticism and quickness and pass rush moves and this, he doesn't jump off the charts, so he starts to get lost in the shuffle. And I don't think a guy like him should, because he is just a solid football player. And I'd be absolutely stunned if he wasn't a solid football player come at the NFL level as well. I mean, when I watch him on film, what do I see? A guy 6'3", about 310 pounds, really, really strong, and uses that strength really, really well. Here is a guy that can hold up in the running game. He is an outstanding run defender, the best run-defending defensive lineman in this draft, bar none, period. That alone would make him a borderline first-round prospect in any draft. And if we're talking about 10, 15, 20 years ago when the running game was a much more important part of NFL offenses, Jarran Reed would be thought of as a much more highly touted prospect than he is because of his ability to play the run. He plays with great strength. He plays with great leverage to the point where sometimes he almost gets his pad level too low. But you don't have to worry about him getting upright a lot. You don't have to worry about him getting pushed off the point because he has a tremendous ability to anchor. He has a tremendous ability to hold up against even double teams and still at times be able to get through those double teams, shed those blocks, and be able to disrupt plays and sometimes even make plays on top of it. And a part that comes into his snap recognition. You know, whereas Ashawn Robinson a lot was the last guy off of the line for the Crimson Tide, it was Jarran Reed a lot of times. It was either him or Jonathan Allen that was the first guy off of the snap. And for a guy 310 pounds who quickness and athleticism isn't really the name to his game, that's impressive stuff because he's compensating for a deficiency. He's compensating for a perceived or actual weakness by making sure that he gets to the point before the offensive lineman gets to the point. And when you take that, combined with that strength, that leverage, that ability to anchor and drive with his legs, you know, this is a guy that, again, is very, very, very tough in the running game. Holds up really well as a tackler. I mean, this is a guy that, to me, showed very solid tackling form. He could tackle straight ahead. He could make sure that he could reach out and get the guy on one side or the other, which sometimes you have to do as a defensive lineman. You have to be able, even with a blocker on you, be able to still find a way to help and make the tackle. And he did that consistently on film the past couple of years. I also love his awareness, a really, really smart football player based off of what I see. And what I like about him is there's a tendency a lot of times if you're trying to, get a pass rush as a defensive lineman, and you're trying to hold up against the run. You're so consumed with your individual one-on-one battle. You're so consumed with paying attention to this guy that you let the play go right by you, or you let the play go away from you. But not Jarran Reed, a guy that's good at getting his hands in the passing lanes when he knows he's not going to get to the quarterback. A guy that even when he's engaged with the blocker, still has his eye in the backfield. He's still watching the quarterback. He's still watching the running back. And that's a really impressive trait, and I think it translates really, really well to the NFL level. Really, really smart, sound football player from a technique standpoint. Really, really sound in terms of his awareness on the football field and where he is, what his responsibility is, and where most importantly the ball is. And I also like his scheme versatility. Here's a guy that I think can play in a 4-3, especially if you're playing at the nose opposite a penetrating one gap pass rusher at the other defensive tackle position. Also a guy that I think he could play in a 3-4. He could play a 5 technique end in a 3-4. He's big enough, and he's strong enough, long enough to do that. I think he's also a guy, if you bulked him up, if you really wanted to, you could have him as a more athletic nose tackle in a 3-4. So he could play all over the place in different types of defenses, so he's not limited to the types of teams that he could potentially appeal to. There's a lot that I really like about his game, and I know people will focus on some of the questions and some of the potential concerns, and they're legitimate. Quickness, athleticism, that's never going to be a hallmark of his game. I think he's a little quicker and a little more athletic than he's given credit for, but he's not explosive. He's not a burner. He's not somebody that's going to wow you with his lateral agility and his pursuit. When the play gets away from him, he can kind of be taken out of the play. But, in a lot of ways, that's just not the football player he is, and we really shouldn't be expecting him to do so. Focus on the strength, not so much the weakness or the lacking in a certain area. One thing that does disappoint me a little bit with him in terms of watching him on film, I wish he played with a more consistent effort level and a more consistent motor, especially once the play did get a little bit away from him. A lot of jogging. At times, it seemed like he was very content. This is the trick and the balance when you're asking a guy to, hold up in space or hold up in the phone booth, if you will. You're asking him to eat up space. You're asking him to take up blockers. Sometimes those guys can be content with just holding their ground. Sometimes those guys aren't looking to still make the play. They're not looking to penetrate. They're not looking to shed the block. They think if they're able to just anchor and hold for it, that's good enough. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. And I'd like to see Jarran Reed put a little more effort that once he does engage with the blocker, even if he is holding up at the point of attack, I'd like to see him show a little bit more drive to go get the ball carry, to go get the quarterback. Part of the problem with him in terms of a pass rusher, which has a lot of people questioning his 3-down potential at the NFL level, which is a somewhat valid concern, is that he doesn't exactly have expansive pass rush repertoire. He just doesn't. I mean, he's not a great pass rusher at this point in time. I think he has some of the tools in place, especially with his ability to get off of the snap quickly, his strength. And if he continues to work on his technique in terms of his hands and arm usage, I think this is a guy that could grow into a pass rusher, a 3-down player, but he's not there yet. At the NFL level right now, he's a 2-down player. I think there's no question about that. If he got a sack, it'd be one of those lucky hustle sacks or one of those ones where he just happened to fall into it because he was in the right place at the right time. He needs to work on his pass rush moves, especially because of the fact he doesn't have that outstanding quickness and overall athleticism where some guys can get away with lesser technique. He cannot. You also got to worry about him being a product of the Alabama system. Fair or not, the fact is he played around a lot of NFL talent the past couple of years on that Alabama Crimson Tide defense. There's no question about it. On the defensive line, linebacker core, the secondary the past couple of years has been NFL talent all over the place. And you wonder sometimes with a guy like a Jarran Reed, a defense didn't have to, or an offense, did not have to focus a lot of double teams his way, did not have to try and game plan against him, in part because they were worried about so many other different things. So did that allow him to shine more than his natural talent and ability suggests that maybe he should have? I don't know. And then in terms of off the field, there was a 2014 DUI arrest. You might say it's not a big deal, it's a mistake. Well, yeah, it's one mistake, and a lot of times one mistake can snowball into several others. It's going to be important that he shows accountability in the offseason process for his mistake, shows that he's not going to repeat that mistake again because, again, these can be warning signs. They could be potential red flags. But with those questions, like I said, I still think he's a really solid football player. In terms of an NFL comparison, I think Michael Brockers, St. Louis Rams, a guy that was a mid-first round pick back in 2012, went 14th overall to the St. Louis Rams, if memory serves me correctly. Two big, strong run stoppers. You have no doubt that they're NFL players. You have no doubt that on first and second down, they are going to be really nice assets and as run stuffers, guys that can eat up multiple blockers, that can occasionally get some penetration in the backfield, guys that are quick off the snap, which actually helps them, even though they're not the most athletic or explosive. I think Brockers is a little more athletic and explosive coming out of LSU than Jarran Reed is coming out of Alabama, but two guys that are really scheme versatile. You know, for Brockers, he happened to go with the Rams, and he ended up playing nose in a 4-3. It helps when you got Aaron Donald playing next to you as well. But he's a guy that could have played 3-4 defensive end. He's a guy that if you wanted to, you could have bulked him up. He could have been a more athletic 3-4 nose tackle because he was big and strong enough and tough enough at the point of attack to be able to anchor and keep good leverage. You know, guys that have a lot of positional versatility. Questions about pass rushing skills. So whereas a lot of the media attention in that 2012 draft was about Michael Brockers, it was Fletcher Cox that went above him in the draft, in large part because Fletcher Cox had much bigger upside as a pass rusher. And to be fair, Fletcher Cox has been a better player at the NFL level than Michael Brockers. Brockers hasn't been a bust, but he most certainly hasn't been Fletcher Cox. And there could be some concerns similar to Michael Brockers about them just solely being primarily two-down players at the NFL level. You know, again, Michael Brockers is never going to wow you or rock your world with his pass rush ability, and I don't expect Jarran Reed to ever do that either. But I think there are guys that could be a little more effective at that than they're given credit for. When I look at Jarran Reed, again, just a solid, safe prospect. A lot to like about him. Not a lot of wow factors, but a lot of just, man, that's a good play. That's a solid football player. That was nice. I love how he did this. I like how he did that. Just a lot of that on his film over the past couple of years that really will force me to gravitate to him more than I thought maybe I was initially going to. He is an NFL-ready run defender right now. No question about it, beyond question to me. The best interior run defender in this year's draft. The best run defending defensive lineman in this draft. 3-4, 4-3 does not matter. He has that NFL skill right now. And he could fit multiple defenses, which really, again, is going to help his draft stock because teams in the 4-3 could be grading him similar to teams in the 3-4. So it really helps that Jarran Reed has that positional versatility where he could play on multiple positions, and that, I think, could ultimately help his draft stock come round one. The thing is, though, he needs to get better as a pass rusher, especially if teams are exploring spending a top 20 pick on him. Do you want to take a run stuffer only? You know, ugh. You need to develop some pass rush skill. You need to develop some type of pass rush move other than just a flat-out bull rush. You know, that can work occasionally, but Jarran Reed's got to be a little more. I saw him do it occasionally, but I'd like to be able to see him do it even more. He could be primarily a two-down player, which is not necessarily a huge knock against him because, frankly, there are a lot of defensive linemen that are taken in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft each year that are 0 or barely 1-down players at the NFL level. Jarran Reed is at least going to be a 2-down player and a very good run stuffer who occasionally put it in pass rush situations, might be able to get a hustle sack here and there, might be able to be in the right place at the right time, might occasionally be able to mess up a guard or a center with his strength and with his power and with his bull rush ability. He might never be a star, but I'd be highly surprised if he was a bust. If you're talking about safe picks in this draft, there are certain guys that I view as just a cut above the rest in terms of how safe of a pick they are. Jarran Reed is one of those guys. I wouldn't put him in the top 10 of my draft class, but 20 to 25 range, maybe if you're a team that sits there like Cincinnati at pick 24, you've got Geno Atkins, manager Jarran Reed inside next to him to replace D'Amato Pecco. Makes all the sense in the world. Even other teams that run the 3-4, teams like the Arizona Cardinals could look at him as somebody that could help. They might be looking for a pass rusher, but this is a guy that could be a starting 3-4 defensive end or even a nose tackle. So somewhere between 20 and 32 is where 31, in that first round, I think is where Jarran Reed's draft range ultimately is. And I think the team that gets him and the coaching staff that gets him is really going to like the player that they get. And actually, I think he's got a little more upside and room for growth and potential than people think. because I think he could be a little bit of a better pass rusher than he's being given credit for. We didn't see it a lot at Alabama, but again, with guys like Allen and Timmy Williams, did he have to be much of a great pass rusher? Not necessarily. There's a little more emphasis and importance and work placed on it, in an NFL training regimen, in an NFL practice environment. This guy could surprise you with just how good he could be. I like Jarran Reed's game a lot, and for me, I'd feel confident spending a late first-round pick on him anywhere from 20 and after, no question about it.